A breaking signal arrived without warning, sending shockwaves through global markets. The United States, led by former President Donald Trump, had called for an extraordinary $573 billion bailout proposal for the railway sector. This unprecedented demand didn't just shake up the world of transport and infrastructure. It had the potential to alter the entire economic landscape of North America. Reports from Washington confirmed that political offices were activated within moments, and market desks in New York and Toronto began adjusting their risk models. Diplomats and analysts alike were left asking, why now? At first glance, the bailout appeared to be a technical solution for the railway industry's long-term stability. But behind the figures, it's clear that this move isn't just about railways. This proposal is about leverage, economic power, and the future balance of power between the United States and Canada. Officials confirmed that the $573 billion request focuses on stabilizing freight corridors, restructuring debt obligations, and potentially expanding cross-border transport infrastructure. But behind the scenes, this bailout is not only about reviving a struggling industry, it's a strategic maneuver with far-reaching political implications. This proposal, massive in scale, quickly became one of the most talked about infrastructure bailout concepts in modern Western political discourse. Its sheer size and ambition raised eyebrows across financial capitals. And yet, the Canadian response wasn't one of hesitant diplomacy. It was firm, swift, and strategic. Senior Canadian officials made it clear that any unilateral move to influence continental trade routes would face strong resistance. However, this was not emotional resistance. It was calculated, quietly unfolding through trade negotiations, regulatory channels, and the formation of institutional alliances. The crux of this situation, however, lies in the often overlooked role of rail infrastructure in North America. Railways do not merely represent an economic utility, they are the invisible backbone of industrial supply chains. Grain exports from the Canadian prairies, automotive components moving through the U.S. Midwest, and energy resources flowing towards coastal ports, all of these rely on a seamless railway network. When a proposal as significant as this one enters the conversation, it forces governments to reveal their priorities and exposes their vulnerabilities. The scale of the proposed bailout forces a recalibration of national strategy, making it clear that the discussion is no longer about infrastructure alone. It's about the future of economic control on the continent. Early reports indicated that the demand was framed as necessary for ensuring long-term logistics resilience across North America. While this phrase may seem neutral, it carries significant geopolitical implications. To policy analysts, it signals an attempt to use fiscal scale as a tool of geopolitical influence. And this is what makes the proposal so intriguing. Its financial scope is being used as a bargaining chip in a much larger political game. To understand how we arrived at this moment, one must first look back to the years before the pandemic. During this time, both the United States and Canada launched comprehensive reviews into critical infrastructure dependencies, especially following disruptions in global supply chains. Reports highlighted the increasing risks posed by aging rail networks and the growing threats posed by climate change. It became clear that efficient freight transport was now a critical component of national security in an era of global competition. At first, these discussions remained technical, confined to engineers, economists, and trade specialists. There were no headlines, no drama, just long meetings and data projections. But slowly, the rhetoric surrounding transportation policy began to shift. What was once framed as a technical issue transformed into a national security issue. As the discussions grew larger, political language began to mix with talk of competitive advantage. By last year, think tanks in both the U.S. and Canada were openly discussing the possibility of a continental logistics reset. The underlying theory was simple. Whoever shapes the rail system shapes the trade routes, and whoever controls the trade routes controls the economic future. But even as these theories were discussed, few expected the proposal to take such a dramatic public form. That's where the narrative takes an interesting turn. Financial signals leading up to this moment suggest that, in recent months, bond markets had begun pricing in increased government borrowing tied to infrastructure spending. Freight companies had been consulting with federal agencies, and regulatory filings hinted at possible restructuring scenarios for major rail operators. These were early tremors, subtle, but undeniably significant. It becomes clear now that the Canadian response wasn't a surprise. Officials had anticipated the potential for this confrontation, even if the specifics weren't fully laid out. Behind the scenes, preparations were underway for potential scenarios. Discussions included strengthening domestic investment frameworks, diversifying export corridors, and increasing coordination with international partners beyond North America. This preparation, while not necessarily a blueprint for full-scale opposition, suggests that Canada was bracing for the possibility of this showdown. As the situation unfolds, we must ask, why would a railway bailout evolve into such a diplomatic flashpoint? The answer lies in economic psychology. Large-scale fiscal demands create perceptions of dominance or dependence, even when framed as cooperative. The demand for such a massive bailout could shift negotiation dynamics across various policy areas, from trade tariffs to defense procurement. In essence, what appears as a simple infrastructure proposal quickly evolves into a powerful tool for leveraging influence. Trade routes, energy pipelines, defense contracts, all are intertwined with infrastructure funding, creating a complex web of interconnected interests. For Canada, the challenge becomes about more than just the money. It's about the broader implications for sovereignty. Accepting externally driven frameworks risks ceding control over long-term strategic autonomy. This is especially critical when it comes to controlling national infrastructure. For U.S. strategists, failure to secure continental alignment would mean losing efficiency advantages in the face of global competition. This calculation is not just about economic power, it's about geopolitical positioning. And as the hours tick by, this issue is becoming more than just a matter of infrastructure, it is a test of political will. The timing of this proposal couldn't be more critical. The request for a $573 billion bailout came at a time of heightened economic uncertainty. Inflation pressures continue to remain uneven, and energy markets are volatile. In such a climate, voters across both countries are increasingly sensitive to government spending decisions. A proposal of this magnitude doesn't exist in isolation. It intersects with domestic political narratives, reshaping public expectations and influencing election messaging. In such an environment, the political stakes couldn't be higher. This is not merely about economic strategy. This is about how both countries communicate their vision to their citizens. Observers are now closely watching the personalities involved in the debate. Donald Trump has long positioned himself as a bold negotiator, one who isn't afraid to take risks in order to achieve strategic outcomes. His approach often focuses on scale, visibility, and rapid agenda-setting moves that some see as momentum building, while others view them as introducing volatility. On the Canadian side, leadership has cultivated an image of disciplined pragmatism. Their responses are often measured, but firm. This contrast in leadership styles is now defining the unfolding narrative. The world is watching as the clash between these two approaches takes shape, but the story grows even more intricate when we examine the hidden motivations behind the bailout proposal. Analysts suggest that the demand could be linked to broader goals, such as trade modernization frameworks or long-term industrial policy shifts. Some speculate that the proposal could serve as leverage to secure a larger share of the market for technological upgrades, such as automation and digital logistics tracking. If true, the proposal is not simply about maintaining existing infrastructure, but transforming it into a next-generation network. The financial scale of this proposal may reflect not just the need for maintenance, but an ambition to modernize the entire logistics system across North America. Infrastructure debates are often seen as slow-moving and bureaucratic, but history has shown that when these discussions reach a critical mass, they can redefine geopolitical relationships faster than military interventions. Economic corridors, if altered, can shift alliances. Investment flows can change diplomatic priorities. And this is where the political equation becomes even more complex. This is no longer just about rebuilding railways. It's about redefining North American cooperation and shaping the continent's future trajectory. The implications are profound, not just for the two countries involved, but for the entire global trading system. Financial institutions, now more than ever, are closely watching the developments surrounding this bailout. Potential scenarios are already being modeled, and one possible outcome involves partial negotiations leading to joint funding mechanisms. Another scenario sees both the U.S. and Canada pursuing their own separate initiatives, creating competing logistics ecosystems in the process. Such a divergence could lead to inefficiencies in the supply chain, but also spark innovation, as each country strives to optimize its own system. While this situation might not immediately lead to a crisis, it could sow the seeds for a prolonged period of uncertainty. But the potential consequences extend beyond just economic impacts. European policymakers have already expressed concern about the importance of resilient transatlantic supply chains. In Asia, exporters are keeping a close eye on North America's transport predictability. Any instability in the region's logistics network could send ripples through global commodity pricing structures. What began as a domestic railway funding demand is rapidly evolving into a global test of economic leadership and credibility. This is why analysts across multiple continents are now paying close attention. As time passes, statements continue to emerge, and market reactions remain cautious yet watchful. Diplomatic channels are active behind closed doors, but public narratives remain fragmented. The growing tension is being shaped by incomplete information and competing interpretations, but one thing remains clear. The story is not just about steel tracks and freight cars anymore. It's about strategy, influence, and the future architecture of North American cooperation. This is a battle for control over critical infrastructure, one that will have profound implications for the future of the region and the world. One thing analysts are also considering is the long-term impact this conflict could have on global economic dynamics. For decades, trade routes have defined economic relationships between nations. Railways, as essential as they are a symbol of these connections. Yet, in the case of North America, these connections are now under threat, not from external enemies, but from internal economic disputes. If the U.S. and Canada fail to reach a consensus on infrastructure spending, it could set the stage for a future where economic growth in the region becomes fragmented, leading to higher costs and less efficient trade. It is not just businesses and governments that are watching closely. Military strategists are quietly assessing how changes in the logistics sector could affect defense capabilities. In modern defense planning, the transport networks, especially railways, are critical for rapid mobilization and resource distribution. A large-scale restructuring of North American rail systems could impact the defense readiness of allied nations, further complicating an already delicate situation. As these political and economic considerations unfold, another critical element comes into play: the role of international institutions. The global financial system is watching with increasing interest as this $573 billion bailout proposal progresses. Organizations that track sovereign debt sustainability are analyzing how such a large commitment could affect fiscal trajectories in both the U.S. and Canada. Meanwhile, global development banks and infrastructure forums are looking closely at whether this situation could set new benchmarks for public investment in advanced economies. Europe, with its emphasis on predictable supply routes, and Asia, with its reliance on North American freight flows for export planning, both have a vested interest in the stability of the continent's logistics systems. If uncertainty lingers, it could have significant ripple effects on global trade systems. And it's not just about trade. The geopolitical implications of this infrastructure debate are massive. What started as a financial proposal is quickly becoming a test of governance, leadership, and long-term strategic vision. The debate over infrastructure financing has moved from a domestic concern to a broader issue of international policy. This shift signals that infrastructure, specifically transport infrastructure, is now seen as a key factor in global economic competition. If the U.S. and Canada can't resolve this issue in a way that satisfies both sides, it could mark the beginning of a new era of global trade uncertainty. And as we continue to watch this unfold, there's another, often overlooked dimension that could influence the outcome: technological transformation. Over the past decade, technological advancements in automation, AI-driven scheduling, and digital tracking systems have drastically changed the economics of rail transport. While these technologies require significant upfront capital, they offer long-term productivity gains that could revolutionize freight networks. If the bailout proposal is tied to these technological upgrades, it could represent not just a financial stabilization effort, but a strategic move to position North America as a leader in next-generation logistics infrastructure. Technological innovation in the transport sector is becoming a game changer. If North America takes the lead in automating freight systems and integrating digital tracking, it could revolutionize the logistics industry, offering a competitive edge on the global stage. This is where the stakes become even higher. Railways are not only essential for economic trade, they also play a crucial role in transporting energy, whether fossil fuels or renewable energy components. The race for energy efficiency is well underway, and the control over efficient transport corridors has never been more valuable. In a world where nations are aggressively pursuing climate transition goals, having control over energy transport systems is a matter of national security. Investment in efficient, modern transport networks today could set the foundation for future energy sustainability, giving regions the ability to adapt to evolving energy markets. The intersection of transportation, technology, and sustainability is not often discussed in mainstream media, but it is an essential factor in understanding the motivations behind the massive bailout proposal proposal. Furthermore, experts are now exploring several potential future scenarios based on the ongoing developments. The first scenario is a negotiated compromise where the U.S. and Canada come together to form a phased investment framework, combining federal support with private sector participation. This compromise could involve joint oversight mechanisms to ensure transparency and equitable benefits for both countries. Such an outcome would demonstrate the capacity for cooperation and problem-solving within democratic systems. The second possible scenario involves strategic divergence. In this case, Canada may decide to pursue independent infrastructure modernization programs while the United States goes ahead with its own bailout initiative. Over time, this parallel development could lead to competing logistics standards and differing investment priorities. As each country seeks to optimize its system, the supply chains may fragment, leading to increased costs but also fostering innovation. The third and most concerning scenario involves prolonged uncertainty. If political negotiations stall, legal disputes intensify, and financial markets adopt a wait-and-see attitude, infrastructure projects could face significant delays. Freight operators may defer capital expenditures, and trade partners might diversify transport routes to reduce exposure to North American volatility. This outcome could create gradual economic consequences, eroding business confidence and making long-term planning difficult. It's a scenario that could cast a shadow over North America's ability to navigate future economic challenges. As we continue to witness this evolving saga, it becomes clear that infrastructure investment is no longer just about improving systems. It's about shaping the future trajectory of economic cooperation, security, and technological innovation. The railway bailout demand has become a lens through which broader questions about globalization, sovereignty, and modernization are being explored. As negotiations continue behind closed doors, the world watches, waiting to see how this will unfold. For now, the demand stands, the response is clear, and the global stakes are higher than ever. What do you think about the $573 billion railway bailout proposal? How do you see it impacting the future of North America and the global economy? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on this evolving story.